The Boys in the Band has now landed on Netflix.
Who's coming? Same old tired fairies you've seen around since day one.
This is gonna be fun.
But this is the end of a long journey for the film. Originally staged as a play in New York, adapted into a film in the 70s, and then revived on Broadway in 2018, it is a natural progression for a work as important as this one. The Boys in the Band is named after a quote from the Judy Garland A Star Is Born, so you know it's pretty gay already, but after a Tony-winning Broadway run, it's now come to Netflix under the steady eye of revival director Joe Mantello and televisual juggernaut Ryan Murphy. But before you watch it, it's important to know that The Boys in the Band is more than just a razor-sharp observation of 20th century gay male life. It is also a play that sits at the tipping point of American gay rights, at a crucial moment in how the Western world viewed homosexuality. The Boys in the Band might just be one of the most important gay works of art ever made. To understand why The Boys in the Band needs to be seen in the same leagues as Angels in America, The Well of Loneliness, or Pink Flamingos, we have to go back to New York in the first half of the 20th century. When we consider the history of homosexuality, it's easy to see it as one long stint in the closet which only changed after the Stonewall riots of 1969. That, however, is not quite how it happened. The truth is much more interesting. For one, it's important to remember Stonewall was not the first LGBT uprising. There were the protests organised by the Mattachine Society and the Daughters of Bilitis in the 1950s and 60s. There were also dozens of other LGBT actions, often protesting police brutality, like those at the Black Cat Tavern and New Faces in Los Angeles back in January 1967. Secondly, and this is where it gets juicy, it's true that at the time of Stonewall, being queer or trans in New York City was a frightening existence. But actually, New York had seen an era of queer liberation decades before. And you want to know what ended it? Sing along if you know the words, it was the excesses of capitalism. If we look back at New York, even in the 1890s, for example, homosexuality was an accepted part of life. Openly gay men could be found on the Bowery or in Harlem, lesbians moved freely about the village, and they had a culture and world all of their own. Come the Roaring Twenties, drag balls were organised, gay literature was proliferated, and gay performers found themselves on the Great White Way. Some of this even lasted into the 30s, where the boom in queer performers was known as the pansy craze. Then along came the economic depression, and just like every utopia before it, people blamed socially progressive ideals for the fact America's economy had collapsed and its citizens were now struggling to get by. Where once queerness had been a part of the tapestry of Manhattan, venues were now threatened with losing their licenses if they employed queers or even tolerated gays as customers. Hot plainclothes police officers would be sent into bars to honey-trap gay men. McCarthy, the same guy who blacklisted supposed communists, said homosexuals were a threat to national security and police animosity ramped up. Twice, every gay bar in New York was shut down.
It was illegal for men to dance together. It was illegal for groups of gay men to congregate together. So you ran the risk of getting arrested socializing.
In the land of theatre, homosexuality was just as controversial. LGBT art was far from de rigueur, but it also had precedent. The Turning Point is often seen as a set of queer-friendly works from just before the Great Depression, including Edouard Baudet's lesbian drama The Captive and Mae West's The Drag, a gay sympathetic play that went to out-of-town tryouts in 1927 and never made it to New York. Audiences were scandalised, the play was censored, and West was arrested.
Well, when I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
In 1927, the Wales Padlock Law was introduced, which banned all representations of homosexuality on stage. 7 years later, the Hays Code did the same for cinema. This doesn't mean that all queer theatre was gone, however. Somebody always managed to sneak around the official line. For example, Hudson Theatre staged gay-focused plays like 1938's White Oaks and 1963's Strange Interlude. But the Wales Padlock Law meant theatre, largely, was as homophobic as the rest of the country. Cut to 1957, when young American homosexual Mart Crowley meets actress Natalie Wood on the film Splendor in the Grass. He is a production assistant and she is starring alongside Warren Beatty. She hired him as her assistant and they became close, and eventually he was inspired to move out to Hollywood, where he continued to work for her and her husband. Wood was sympathetic of the LGBT community of the West Coast already, and helped to financially support Crowley so that he could write his play, The Boys in the Band. But wait, I hear you say, a gay play in the age of the Wales Padlock Law? Surely it wouldn't be allowed. And you would be right. Not only were depictions of homosexuality illegal at his time of writing, but agents recoiled at the idea of supporting Crowley's openly homosexual production.
When I started to write this play, I had been so advised by so many people in positions of authority not to go there.
Even with the support of august talents like Edward Albee, who wrote Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and director Richard Barr, who would later go on to direct Stephen Sondheim's Sweeney Todd, major theatres balked at the idea of staging queer work. Then, in 1967, the Wales Padlock Law was abolished, making it a little easier to legally stage gay work, even if actors were now told starring in it would ruin their careers.
I wanted to acknowledge the bravery of those guys that took on those parts, even against the advice of their agents.
Yet, against all odds, The Boys in the Band opened off-Broadway at Theatre 4 on West 55th Street in 1968. It was meant to run for only 5 performances. It ran for just over 1,000, closing in September 1970. One of the earliest plays to centre on the lives of homosexual men, the New York Times reported that cast members drilled holes in the set to see who would be sat in the best seats, and saw the likes of Jackie Kennedy, Marlene Dietrich, and Groucho Marx alongside City Mayor John Lindsay. The original cast came together for a film version in 1970, and although the play was a rave success, all the cast members who identified as gay remained in the closet during the run and afterwards. Pride marches started in New York in 1970 to mark the anniversary of Stonewall, and yet after the play had ended it was still technically illegal to be homosexual in New York and 46 other states in America. By the 1990s, 5 members of the original cast, director Robert Moore, and Richard Barr, who produced the show, died in the AIDS epidemic. Though its cast may not have escaped the shadow of the closet America built for its queer citizens, it is undeniable The Boys in the Band did wonders for the art that helped accelerate queer liberation in years to come. It showed how complex and varied queer men could be like no art before it had dared to do. Without it, it is highly unlikely we would have seen stories like Queer as Folk, Will and Grace, or Looking. Now, Ryan Murphy and the cast of the Broadway revival are helping to immortalise one of the 20th century's most important plays on Netflix. Both the 2018 run and the 2020 film feature the same cast, all of whom are openly gay, a huge milestone in and of itself and one to be celebrated.
When you've got leading men saying, here's who I am and I'm still working, or I get to work, not in spite of that, but because of it, that is a turn of events. That changes the zeitgeist.
Now, gay men around the world can have the privilege of seeing their lives reflected in art, just as it was for the queers of Manhattan half a century ago.
There are certain historical things that are part of your social DNA, and you can be a better version of who you are by knowing what came before.
Make sure you subscribe to Netflix UK for more insight into the history behind your favourite movies, behind-the-scenes content, and deep dives into your favourite shows. You can stream The Boys in the Band right now.
Yeah, thank you and fuck you!